Welcome to the next chapter of the Resident Evil timeline. Last time I covered the next mainline entry after the fall of Raccoon City, Code Veronica, Capcom's attempt to create a Sega-exclusive Resident Evil game that shifted from the Saturn to the Dreamcast and beyond. Claire Redfield was captured by Umbrella and taken to their Rockford Island facility as a prisoner, only to find herself in another T-Virus outbreak, and in the clutches of the crazed Ashford family. And Chris Redfield made his return on a rescue mission for Claire, and together the siblings discovered the secrets of Alexia Ashford and her deadly new virus, T. Veronica. Today we'll be covering a much smaller, less talked about entry in the Resident Evil series that likely takes place soon after the events of Code Veronica, Resident Evil Gaiden. Now your first reaction might be, wait a minute, I thought Gaiden wasn't canon. So before I'm flooded with comments informing me of such breaking news, let me be clear in saying, yes, that is correct. Gaiden is not considered canon in the official Resident Evil storyline. However, it's still a cool little Game Boy Color game that's part of Resident Evil history. And this series is all about celebrating all parts of Resident Evil, not just nitpicking what parts are canon and which one aren't. So let's cover Gaiden, insert it into the series with what works, similar to what we did with Operation Raccoon City. Because if we dig a little deeper, there's very few things that keep this game from fitting very nicely into the Resident Evil timeline. It actually fits in quite well. Before we get into all the details, I'd like to give a big shout out to my Patreon members. Your continued support keep these videos coming, and if you'd like your name up here too, get access to exclusive sneak peeks, progress updates, and watch my videos before everyone else, go to patreon.com/GamerThumbTV, or click the link in the description to get started. Without support from viewers like you, my content creation journey would simply not be possible, so thank you. Now let's get started. While Code Veronica was intended to be their big Sega entry, Capcom also wanted a successful handheld Resident Evil. Working on such a massive series with multiple entries would stretch any developer's resources thin, so Capcom depended on partnerships to continue developing new side entries. By mid-2001, their deals were showing results. Code Veronica was a group effort across multiple companies. The arcade industry saw Resident Evil release with an alternate retelling of Code Veronica in the form of Gun Survivor 2, the result of a deal with Namco. These recent releases were far from failure, yet on the handheld front, Capcom was finding much more difficulties. Creating a handheld version of a survival horror game presents many challenges. First and foremost, it likely wouldn't be very scary on the small screen. The sudden jump scares of the original, the spooky atmosphere, at the time modern graphics, cheesy voice acting, several aspects that made Resident Evil would just be compromised. In fact, there already existed an attempt at a handheld entry on Tiger's Gamecom portable console, with Resident Evil 2 in 1998. To say the least, it was severely underpowered. I mean, do I need to explain? Look at this. Another attempt was made by UK-based developer HotGen Studios, professionals involved in such classics as Batman: Dark Tomorrow. They were approached by Capcom to port the original Resident Evil to the Game Boy Color for a 1999 release. The plan was to make it as close to the original experience as possible within the limits of the Game Boy Color's power. What they came up with was respectable, and it does exist in playable form today via emulation, but it does end in the final lab area considering all sorts of assets are unfinished. Due to programming issues, it was delayed multiple times until March of 2000, when Capcom canceled the project due to them not being confident the product would make consumers or Capcom happy. With multiple failed attempts to bring Resident Evil on the go, it was clear that any handheld experience will be completely compromised as a port of an existing game. Whatever form the handheld game took would have to be a brand new story, and it would have to be unique in some way. Capcom finally received their handheld Resident Evil game thanks to Virgin Interactive and Dino Crisis. In the late 90s, early 2000s, Virgin Interactive had a partnership with Capcom to distribute the Resident Evil games in Europe. The company desired to deepen their business relationship with Capcom and began searching for third-party studios that could successfully port existing Capcom games. The search resulted in a British game developer called M4. And M4 was contracted to create a Game Boy Color port of the Capcom dinosaur survival horror game Dino Crisis. They worked under the belief that a direct port of an existing game just wouldn't work, and they created a demo of their Game Boy Color Dino Crisis for Capcom. Capcom was so impressed they canceled both the original Resident Evil port, the Dino Crisis port, and hired M4 to create a brand new entry in the series for the Game Boy Color instead, using their Game Boy Color Dino Crisis engine. M4 began development on Resident Evil Gaiden and came up with a unique gameplay style that's never been seen again in the series. Gaiden uses a top-down perspective as you run around a map similar to old-school Zelda titles. Once you encounter a zombie, the game enters as first-person mode inspired by games like the 1987 role-playing game Dungeon Master and many others. A slider at the bottom was added in, recommended by Shinji Mikami since he operated as a content advisor for Gaiden. The slider moves left and right across the screen and you press the attack button when it's in range to cause damage. Hitting the middle causes even more damage. Other than recommending the slider, Capcom themselves were mostly hands-off during development. M4 took over creation of the game. As far as the story, it was written by Hiroki Kato, the director of Code Veronica, and he sent it to M4. Gaiden brought both Barry Burton and Leon S. Kennedy back to the series, and fun fact on the box art, that vest Leon's wearing is just his artwork from Resident Evil 1.5, which is kind of funny because you never actually see the RPD vest in the game, and Raccoon City is long gone. Leon and Barry are investigating an escaped BOW on a cruise ship, and yes, I know I've mentioned cruise ships several times in these videos. Capcom had been trying over and over to get a cruise ship into the series, and Gaiden was the first successful entry to fully incorporate it into a Resident Evil story. And Gaiden had very similar undertones to The Thing, with the monster being able to take the forms of different people. By 2001, consumers were becoming more and more interested in the newly released Game Boy Advance, and M4 was pushing to move development over from the Game Boy Color to the Advance. They made a GBA prototype with significantly improved graphics, but Capcom declined it due to the cost of having to restart development from scratch. Gaiden would be completed for the Game Boy Color instead, and released on December 14, 2001 in European territories before anywhere else, March 29, 2002 in Japan, and June 4, 2002 in North America. The game received mixed to negative reviews, overall criticizing its lack of scares with its bright, simplistic graphics, the puzzles being reduced to nothing more than fetch quests, yet praised for its unique storyline filled with multiple plot twists. As far as why the game doesn't fit into the rest of the series, as I said before, most of the story fits just fine. In fact, many elements introduced in this for the first time even are confirmed later on in the series. Umbrella using cruise ships as fronts to transport bioweapons, Leon and Barry being part of anti-Umbrella groups. That all became canon later, though Gaiden never specifically identified what groups these are. In canon, Leon is with the US Stratcom Anti-Umbrella Pursuit and Investigation team, and we know Barry had some ties with Stratcom and anti-Umbrella activities, though that part of Barry's history has never been detailed in canon, so it's not a stretch to believe that they may have ended up on a mission together at some point, especially given both of their connections to the Redfields. There is one thing that puts a hard stop on Gaiden being canon, one thing that there is no way to explain around. The ending shot in the game, Leon is bleeding green, revealing that he's a fake copy that the monster created by the end, implying that the real Leon's either missing or dead by Gaiden's conclusion. In this video, to make this canon, all we need to do is leave that part out, and it always felt like it was nothing more than an out-of-nowhere shock ending. So let's make Gaiden canon again. How did Barry and Leon end up together, by the way? What's a BOW doing on a cruise ship, and how is it tied to a young girl named Lucia? Let's find out in the Resident Evil Timeline Part 9, Operation Starlight. December 1998. Chris and Claire Redfield uncovered Alexia Ashford's creation of the new T. Veronica virus, and stopped her ambitions of dominating the entire world under her rule. And Albert Wesker revealed that he was alive and better than ever. Although he did fail to collect Alexia and extract T. Veronica samples from her body, he was able to collect the body of the infected Steve Burnside. His mission was successfully accomplished before Umbrella's Antarctic facility exploded, and it surely wouldn't be the last time Chris Redfield and Albert Wesker confronted each other. For the next 2 years, Umbrella continued its legal battle post-Raccoon City. Oswald Spencer's conspiracy theories were slightly successful in the early portions of the Raccoon trials, but by the year 2000, the tide was turning. The evidence against Umbrella was monumental, hard for any legal professionals to argue against. The Raccoon trials were far from over, but Oswald Spencer began fearing for his and the company's future. It was becoming a real possibility that Umbrella would be found criminally guilty on all charges. Umbrella had already begun losing legitimate partnerships with other companies, and public trust was beyond repair. The Federation of Pharmaceutical Companies was also under a microscope. It was designed to be a council of pharmaceutical corporations around the world that would collaborate with each other, the largest of them being the Umbrella Corporation and Tricell Inc. Some of the companies in the group were already being implicated in their own bioweapons research programs due to their ties with Umbrella. With Umbrella's loss of Rockford Island, Sheena, and the Antarctic base, their ability to produce bioweapons was becoming compromised. Behind the scenes, Oswald Spencer had ordered Sergei Vladimir to begin moving Umbrella's greatest assets to a new facility in an effort to hide them and continue producing bioweapons to sell on the black market. Umbrella would need funds to survive and rebuild. And Umbrella found the perfect location in the Caucasus mountain range in southern Russia, where an old Soviet oil refinery was used as a facade to hide the new facility, an enormous laboratory that Sergei had built underground. Publicly, Umbrella used dummy corporations to take ownership of the facility in order to hide their own involvement. Internally, the new lab worked together with Umbrella USS teams to pick up and transport bioweapons to various locations across the globe through another front. Umbrella's subsidiary companies that own several different cruise lines, all with their own fleet of ships. The world believed that multiple luxury ships sailed the oceans of the world, carrying passengers on vacations, when in reality they were hiding illegal bioweapons and Umbrella employees on the same ships. Since Umbrella changed their tactics and began moving their assets, the STARS investigation in Europe turned up nothing useful, besides labs that Umbrella had already abandoned. Chris, Jill, and Barry continued working with a private anti-Umbrella group supported by US Stratcom, and Claire Redfield joined a human rights agency founded after the Raccoon City outbreak called TerraSave. TerraSave was created to provide aid as needed in regions affected by disasters. They investigated potential bioweapon incidents and ensured the safety and recovery of the people affected. Although TerraSave wasn't related to Stratcom or its classified anti-Umbrella division, Claire often went on training missions with Chris, and she began noticing that he was struggling with his experiences, though he did attempt to hide it as best he could.
So, I heard the company shrink thought.
So Claire Redfield listens to shrinks now.
I'm just asking how my big brother's doing, you jerk.
Don't worry about me. I don't need any saving.
Are you okay?
No.
What is it? I'm just asking how my big brother's doing, you jerk.
Chris's trauma was continuing to worsen, but he refused to take it easy until Umbrella and Wesker were brought to justice. The world was quickly changing, and the threat of bioterrorism was spreading beyond Umbrella. If he didn't finish the fight, what happened in Raccoon City could happen elsewhere, or in the worst case scenario, on a worldwide scale. Chris wasn't alone in his fight, but he held the weight of the world on his shoulders. After Raccoon City, Umbrella's bioweapons were being leaked on the black market, in many cases from rogue employees, from Umbrella themselves, and from various elements operating within world governments. In October of 2000, civil war raged in the Republic of Penemistan, a country in southern Asia sharing a border with China. The civil war was becoming so severe that it was threatening to spread outside the country's borders. In response, the United States decided to send in American troops in an attempt to combat the aggressive factions fueling the civil war and help put an end to it. An American Special Ops unit, the Mad Dogs, fought their way through the war zone, constantly under heavy enemy fire, and they encountered exactly the same scenario that Chris feared. The consequences of Umbrella's actions had finally become real, and bioweapons were used in open warfare for the first time.
Where'd that body go? What are they?
In an effort to keep them quiet, Captain Jason of the Mad Dogs was given an award, and the title of the Hero of Penhamstan, after leading the rescue of a downed helicopter crew, and the bioweapon incident they faced was quickly covered up by the US government. The outside world was completely oblivious to the danger that was present in the post-Raccoon City world. By the end of the year 2000, US Stratcom began uncovering Umbrella's links to the cruise industry and began an investigation of bioweapon shipments. One of the many vessels under Stratcom surveillance was the luxury cruise liner Starlight. During one of its voyages, the ship went completely silent. The Stratcom investigation came to the conclusion that Umbrella had a new bioweapon on board, and they sent in Agent Leon S. Kennedy. His mission was to discover what happened in the Starlight, then confirm and destroy the bioweapon. However, Leon stopped reporting in, and the Stratcom branch supervising the mission became concerned after 24 hours passed, and Leon hadn't reported in. Operation Starlight had just become a rescue mission. Someone with bioweapon experience was needed, and X-Stars members were the perfect candidates. Chris and Jill were unavailable, busy with another mission, and Barry Burton was called in for a briefing. They informed Barry that Leon was missing, and they had no reports on what was happening inside the ship. Barry would essentially be going in blind, and they knew almost nothing about the suspected bioweapon aside from it having some sort of humanoid form. Barry knew Leon through Claire and didn't hesitate to accept the mission. He had to find and rescue the man that helped Claire escape Raccoon City, uncover the bioweapon, and destroy it. Barry was taken in by helicopter during a storm that was progressively getting worse, but there was no time to waste. Once he landed on the deck, he discovered a ghost ship. There was deafening silence aside from the rustling of the ship and the thunderstorm outside. Entire rooms were empty, tables and furniture were flipped, blockading different areas of the ship. It reminded him of the reports from survivors of Raccoon City, attempting to keep the undead away. Something catastrophic had happened on the Starlight. Stratcom HQ was monitoring the ship now that Barry was on board, and detected movement inside the second floor lobby. Perhaps it was Leon, or passengers with some answers. But instead of assistance, Barry found himself in a familiar nightmare. HQ had no reports of T-Virus production on board the ship, but it was clear the T-Virus had somehow spread on board. As Barry made his way deeper into the ship, the undead and dead were everywhere. He couldn't find any passengers still alive. If they weren't infected, they were mauled and left on the floor. Cruise-goers, families, chefs, nobody had escaped the terror of the T-Virus. Barry decided to head straight to the ship's security room. If nobody was alive to give him answers, he would get them from whatever footage the security room stored. The T-Virus outbreak must have happened quickly. On the pool deck, he found life rings covered in blood, and passengers still wearing swimwear on deck chairs. They didn't have a chance to escape. Once Barry arrived at the security monitor, he realized there was a survivor on the ship, and it wasn't Leon. A young teenage girl sat alone and clearly terrified. Barry called out to her through the speaker system, and she responded thinking that it was Leon. She identified herself as Lucia and claimed that Leon helped her survive against the infected on the ship. Leon told her to stay hidden and he'd be right back after taking care of the monster infecting everyone. And suddenly a loud banging came through. That same monster was attempting to get to Lucia. Barry had to find her before he ran out of time. The girl was alone, scared, and in immediate danger. Barry still didn't know where Leon was, but at least he could save Lucia. And he also learned that the T-Virus didn't spread like it did in Raccoon City. The bioweapon had been rampaging through the ship and infecting passengers. Hearing Lucia's screams, Barry rushed in and stood face to face with the bioweapon. The monster bent back and its stomach area opened, revealing long tentacles that stretched out and grabbed Lucia. The girl screamed in terror, and Barry opened fire on it, pumping several bullets into it until it let her go. If he didn't fight the creature off, they'd both be dead in seconds. Unlike anything Barry had ever seen, after suffering enough damage, the bioweapon melted down into an amoeba-like form and scurried away into the shadows. Lucia was relieved that it was gone, but Barry was more amazed that she didn't have a scratch on her. The girl assumed that she was simply just lucky and told Barry that the monster was gone. She claimed that she could somehow feel it when it was nearby. Barry suspected immediately that there was more to Lucia than she let on, but for now, she'd accompany him. Lucia stayed close while Barry reported his findings back to HQ. It was time to find Leon. HQ shared the location of the last communication they had with Leon near the first-class cabins of the ship. While exploring the Starlight hallways and decks, Barry protected Lucia from the infected passengers and workers. She couldn't feel the bioweapon anywhere near them, but Barry still had to be cautious. It could be hiding anywhere in its current form. The Starlight Tyrant wasn't the typical Umbrella Tyrant. It was a variant of the T-103, injected with a genetically modified parasite that attached itself to the Tyrant's digestive system and ate its way through its tough skin. The parasite could extend its tentacles and use them to administer the T-virus to its prey, and if it chose to, it could devour its victims through the entryway in the Tyrant's stomach. The merger of the Tyrant and the parasite also resulted in a mutation that allowed it to change its genetic makeup and size in order to escape dangerous situations. As they approached Leon's location, suddenly Lucia felt the Starlight Tyrant's presence, as Barry feared had been following them in an effort to ambush the pair. Barry questioned how Lucia could feel it, and she seemed genuine when she claimed she didn't know. It was just a feeling she had when it was nearby, and that feeling was getting stronger. From a dark corner, the Starlight Tyrant reformed and grabbed Lucia. Strangely enough, the Tyrant didn't kill her immediately as Barry would have expected. It took the girl and left quickly into the darkness. They were both gone, and the Tyrant didn't seem interested in Barry at all. Perhaps Leon had more information. In one of the rooms nearby, where Leon was believed to have been, Barry found a large hole that didn't belong. It looked like the flooring was damaged from heavy furniture and never repaired. He looked into the dark hole and could barely make out a figure laying on the ground. The figure was Leon. From this distance, Barry couldn't tell if Leon was still alive, so he grabbed a rope to safely traverse into the darkness down below. Much to his relief, Leon was alive. He'd fallen through the hole and hit his head, remaining knocked out for hours. Leon was a bit dazed but alert and was surprised to see Barry. His first thoughts when he gathered himself was to see his safety. Barry explained that she was captured by a tyrant and mentioned her ability to feel the creature nearby. He even theorized that she could actually be the BOW they were looking for. Leon had spent more time with the girl and discounted that she was anything but a child in need of help. Together they set out to rescue her. Leon was a government-trained agent that was extremely attentive to detail, but Barry operated by trusting his gut. He suspected there had to be more to her story. For now, he'd help her, but he kept a close eye on her. The XRPD and X-STARS officer blasted their way through the infected hordes on the ship and found no signs of any other survivors. It appeared that Lucia truly was the only one left. They returned to the security room to see if the cameras caught the Tyrant's location, and they witnessed the incredible. The Starlight Tyrant was carrying Lucia away. She didn't appear injured, and the BOW wasn't attempting to harm her in any way, adding fuel to Barry's theory. There had to be a connection between them. But Leon deduced that if she were an Umbrella-created weapon, she would have attacked them. While protecting Lucia before Barry's arrival, Leon had spoken to her about her powers. She claimed that she was adopted from an orphanage 2 years before, and her ears started ringing around that time. She had an acute sense of hearing, and she healed quickly from cuts and bruises. Other kids bullied her once they realized that she was different. Eventually, her adoptive family decided to move in with relatives in Europe, and they boarded the Starlight together for the voyage. When the Tyrant attacked the ship, Lucia's parents became one of the many infected on board, and Lucia was left alone. Once the pair arrived on the deck of the ship, Leon yelled at the Tyrant to put Lucia down. It attacked them instantly. The Tyrant fell, but was getting back up quickly and its wounds were healing. Leon and Barry had no choice but to stand their ground, but with every shot the Tyrant would heal itself quickly and continue moving towards them, but barely even noticing them. Almost looking past them, fully focused on pursuing Lucia, they ran through the Starlight attempting to lose it, and suddenly an explosion rocked the ship. The damage on the ship was extensive even before Barry stepped foot on it. If the fire reached the engine room's fuel converters, the entire ship would blow with them on board. Barry called an HQ for evac, but the BOW was still alive and the storm outside was getting worse. No pilot could land safely in those conditions. For now, Barry and Leon had to simply survive until the storm cleared up. Barry went off on his own, telling Leon that he had to trust him. There was something he had to do. Leon was left with Lucia and began searching for the fire suppression system, wondering what Barry could possibly be up to at a time like this. Together with Lucia, Leon headed to the security room after activating the ship's sprinkler system. At the very least, the sprinklers would buy the ship some more time from suffering any additional damage. When he looked at the security monitors, he caught Barry communicating with someone and telling them that he had Lucia. It sounded like Barry was communicating with Umbrella for pickup. From getting to know Chris and the others since Raccoon City, Leon knew about Barry's betrayal of the STARS team in the Arclay Mansion, and he understood the circumstances that forced Barry to do so. But Leon's thoughts began racing. What if Barry actually was a double agent for Umbrella this entire time? When Leon found Barry, he questioned his motives and Barry pointed a gun at him. He demanded Lucia. Just below in the waters next to the ship, an Umbrella submarine appeared and Barry took Lucia down to its main hatch. Leon couldn't believe that Barry had betrayed them and rushed to the side of the ship. But the way down was already retracted, and Umbrella USS troops opened fire on him. Leon fired back, however the USS team had superior firepower and forced him to retreat. Then a second explosion rattled the ship. Power began flickering, and the engine could be heard struggling from a distance. Another explosion would likely take out the entire ship. With no way safely to the sub, Leon decided to head to the engine room. Perhaps there he could buy the Starlight a little more time. But inside the engine room, the Tyrant was rampaging and damaging all the equipment in sight. It was an attempt by Umbrella to cover their tracks. What they wanted was Lucia. They had originally ordered the Tyrant to capture her. Now that she was in their grasp, the Tyrant was supplied with new orders. Destroy all evidence of Umbrella's involvement by destroying the ship and any survivors inside. Leon opened fire on the creature while Barry was inside the submarine, being thanked by the Umbrella USS captain. Suddenly, Barry raised his gun and put it to Lucia's head. Barry Burton had his own plans, and he would never be controlled by Umbrella again. Barry's betrayal was an act, a plan to board the submarine and hijack it by any means necessary. He contacted Umbrella because he knew they couldn't afford to lose another bioweapon. Since the storm was too dangerous for a rescue chopper, he could use the submarine to evacuate himself, Leon, and Lucia. Barry demanded answers from the captain. His gut instinct was correct. There was a connection between the girl and the monster. The bioweapon wasn't the Tyrant at all. The bioweapon was inside Lucia. The Tyrant was simply a tool to retrieve her. When Lucia was adopted as part of her medical checkup, she was secretly implanted with a genetically engineered parasitic bioweapon that needed a human host to grow. The abilities that Lucia exhibited were a side effect of the parasite's growth within her body. They estimated that the parasite had 10 days left before it was fully grown, and when it was, it would eat its way out of Lucia's body painfully. The Starlight ship was the perfect way to smuggle the parasite overseas, and Lucia was nothing more than a carrier that would be disposed of. The submarine had been following the Starlight for days, waiting for the parasite to be ready for extraction. In the meantime, the Tyrant would end the threat of any witnesses and collect her. Barry demanded at gunpoint that Umbrella use their onboard surgeons to remove the parasite from Lucia. The captain's only concern was the parasite. Removing it now would mean it wouldn't grow fully, but he had no choice and authorized its removal. At the very least, they could attempt to salvage it. Barry held the captain at gunpoint while he watched the surgery take place. Umbrella doctors were able to extract it safely through Lucia's mouth, and for the first time the parasite was witnessed outside of the human body, small and harmless. Or so it seemed. Lucia was free from its grasp, but the parasite had grown enough to survive independently and freed itself from capture. It attacked the captain and plunged itself into his body, instantly infecting him with T-virus. The captain turned almost immediately and Barry had to think quickly. Armed with the truth, Barry and Lucia rushed back to the hatch to leave the sub. The escape plan was a lost cause at this point. The parasite was loose inside and Barry couldn't risk it getting to the outside world, and the sub was filling quickly with infected Umbrella workers. On the way back, Barry apologized for using Lucia as bait and even offered that she could stay with his family once this nightmare was over, though it was more likely that Stratcom would find placement for her. He also discovered more research on the parasite. Umbrella believed the parasite had the ability to mimic other living creatures after coming into contact with them to blend in with its surroundings. In initial tests, it could even respond to orders, implying it had an understanding of language, and Umbrella also observed that the creature had green blood flowing inside of it. Unfortunately, the Starlight Tyrant had made it on board and chased them. When the Tyrant entered the submarine, the parasite attacked it also and consumed it into its own being. The newly created parasite Tyrant burst out of the submarine's hatch and made it back on the ship. In a fortunate turn of events, the storm was beginning to lighten up. Barry had to find Leon and call HQ for evacuation. The ship was slowly sinking and taking on water. Fires were breaking out, floors were falling apart. Barry had to find Leon fast, and when he did, he attempted to explain his actions, but Leon didn't respond. Lucia was the first to realize they were not looking at Leon. It was the parasite tyrant, mimicking a human almost perfectly. One of Umbrella's most dangerous bioweapons that could infiltrate a population, and people would never know until it was too late. Barry fought the creature off and found the actual Leon alive and well, recovering from his own encounter with it. Barry questioned if he was the real Leon, and Leon barked back angrily for Barry leaving him. Barry would explain in time, but another explosion compromised the hull. The Starlight was taking on even more water. They had to get to the deck immediately and contact HQ for extraction. Just outside near the doorway leading to the deck, the parasite tyrant jumped out and grabbed Lucia. It dragged her into the sea, but it let go quickly. Barry was able to jump in behind her and rescue her after it mysteriously let go. But taking Lucia was a ploy to copy her form. This parasite wasn't interested in her. It simply wanted to infiltrate the human population. In front of them stood two Lucias, and both of them claimed to be the real one. Lucia remembered the detail that the parasite couldn't replicate: actual blood, since green blood flowed within it. To prove she was the real Lucia, she cut her hand and showed Barry and Leon the red blood dripping from it. And so they opened fire. The parasite tyrant had shown its ultimate form, but Leon and Barry were determined to destroy it. They had to get off the ship immediately and made their way on top of the Umbrella submarine below. The only threats remaining were the infected inside of it and the BOW that was going down with the Starlight ship, consumed by the fires raging on board, and with no way to escape. Operation Starlight was a success. The bioweapon destroyed, Lucia safe and free of infection. Immediately, Lucia noticed that the ringing in her ears was completely gone. She no longer felt the creature's presence, now a completely normal girl for the first time since she was adopted. With the storm clear, Leon called HQ for extraction from the surface of the submarine, and he made sure the submarine would be sanitized and infected. Surely the data inside held more information that could be used against Umbrella, ending the events of Resident Evil Gaiden. Join me next time for the Resident Evil Timeline Part 10, the Stratcom missions. Leon S. Kennedy receives new orders with Special Ops Soldier Jack Krauser, a mission that takes them into the heart of the Amazon, and together they discover the legacy of the T. Veronica virus lives on. A mission that will fuel the consequences of bioweapon incidents to come. And another Stratcom agent, Bruce McGivern, is sent out to investigate the cruise ship Spencer Rain, only to discover another ship-wide outbreak caused by a madman created by Umbrella's own efforts to avoid accountability. A madman that will demonstrate the monstrous effects of combining elements of the T virus and the G virus.